Subcommittee will come to order without objection. The chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. Would ask the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Bishop, to lead the committee and those present for the hearing in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We welcome everyone to the second hearing of the Select Committee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. The chair now recognizes himself for an opening statement. In the run-up to the 2020 presidential election, FBI Special Agent Elvis Chan, in his deposition in Missouri versus Biden, said that he repeatedly informed Twitter and other social media platforms of the likelihood of a hack and leak operation in the run-up to that presidential election. He did it even though there was no evidence. In fact, he said in his deposition that we hadn't seen anything, no intrusions, no hack. Yet he repeatedly told him something was coming. Yoel Roth, head of trust and safety at Twitter, testified that he had had regular meetings with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and other folks regarding election security. During these weekly meetings, federal law enforcement agencies communicated that they expected a hack and leak operation. The expectations of a hack and leak operation were discussed throughout 2020, and he was told they would occur in a period shortly before the 2020 presidential election, likely in October. And finally, he said, I also learned in these meetings that there were rumors that a hack and leak operation would involve Hunter Biden. So, what did the government tell him? A hack and leak operation was coming. How often did the government tell him this? Repeatedly for a year. When did the government say it was going to happen? October of 2020. And who did the government say it would involve? Hunter Biden. Now think about it. Government had no evidence of any intrusions, no evidence of a hack and leak, yet for a year they tell Twitter that a hack and leak is coming, it's coming in October, and it will involve Hunter Biden. No evidence, but the FBI knows what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and who it's going to involve. Now that's amazing. That is amazing to me. Maybe they get the time right. We're kind of used to October surprises every 4 years. So maybe they get the time right. But they got the time, they got the method, and they got the person. That's amazing. It's almost like these guys were clairvoyant. How did they know? How did they know? Maybe it's because they had the laptop, and they had had it for a year. They had the laptop, they knew it wasn't hacked, but that's not what they told Twitter. They didn't tell Twitter that information, and Twitter believed, frankly, everything they said. In those weekly meetings, the FBI had built a cozy relationship with this tech company and others as well, we believe. Emails between the FBI and Twitter began with the greeting, hey, Twitter folks. Emails that asked Twitter to take down accounts and limit visibility of tweets. The FBI handed out security clearance to folks at Twitter. They communicated with Twitter on the secret teleporter app where messages disappear after a certain length of time. And of course, they paid Twitter $3.4 million. In addition, on August 6, 2020, the FBI briefed Senators Grassley and Johnson, and according to the senator's testimony last month in front of this committee, the briefing was bogus and done so someone could go leak that the briefing had happened and undermine the senator's investigation. In September of 2020, a government-funded think tank gets involved. They do a tabletop exercise. The participants include the New York Times, the Washington Post, and other mainstream media outlets. Facebook is there. Mr. Roth of Twitter is there. The organizer was the former CEO of NPR and the former head of news at Twitter. The mock exercise is hosted by the Aspen Institute. The Aspen Institute, which, by the way, in 2020, their budget was $9.3 million. $5 million from the State Department, $4 million from USAID. Almost all their budget. Guess the title. Guess the title of this exercise. The Aspen Digital Hack and Dump Working Group. And guess who the subject was? Guess who the subject was? Hunter Biden. That's amazing. October 14, 2020, the New York Post runs the story on the Biden laptop, and Twitter takes it down, even though it was accurate, and even though it didn't violate Twitter's rules of Twitter's rules. Other social media companies do the same. Mainstream press works to downplay and discredit the story. Finally, as if on cue, 5 days later, on October 19th, 51 former Intel officials signed a letter with the now famous sentence, "The Biden laptop story has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation." Something that was absolutely false. Our government built a cozy relationship with big tech. They primed him for a hack and leak operation. They funded the think tank, which further primed big tech and big media. They leaked information to undermine the good work of 2 United States senators. And then 51 former Intel officials closed the deal with their letter. As Mr. Schellenberger pointed out in his reporting, the information op was run on us, run on we the people. And if that's not the weaponization of government, I don't know what is. And I'll get to this in a second, but I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. I'll get to this after we allow the ranking member her opening statement. I yield to the ranking member for an opening statement.
Thank you. Before my opening statement, Mr. Chairman, as a point of order, it's been my understanding that one of the witnesses has, within the last half an hour, released additional information that the Republicans may, and you as the majority, may have been able to review and have information about. And if that information is, in fact, going to be used at this hearing, I just want the point of order to be recognized that the Democrats have not been able to review or to see any of that information. Will you be using any of the information that has recently been released by... Excuse me? Will you be using any of that information?
We'll be using whatever information our staff has put together for us to use at this hearing.
And have you had that information before this hearing began, before today?
We use all information that is given to our staff, and we will use it to make sure we educate the American people.
And information that you have not shared with us?
Oh, we think it was posted online.
Within just this half an hour, the last 20 minutes, but it's not information
do
that
you want
was
us to
privy
get,
to us before
you want us to get you a copy of it? Because we can make a copy
I think we
for
can
you.
go online and find a copy. We can look on our Twitter accounts and see it. But I just want the point of order that you have not shared any of that with us. And I understand that you may have been looking at this long before today's hearing.
We obtained it at the same time frame that was
Excuse me,
posted online.
before we continue, is one of your colleagues trying to speak to me? Or I think this was a conversation between you and me.
I was speaking to the parliamentarian, if you don't mind.
Oh, okay.
It's the gentlelady's time.
Okay. All right. Well,
And I recognize you for an opening statement.
I had a point of order, which I was asking you to address.
And I answered your question.
Okay, great. Now I will begin my opening statements. 3 weeks ago, House Oversight had this hearing with actual Twitter executives who had actual firsthand knowledge about what happened in 2020. And that didn't go so well for the House Republicans because real evidence showed that there wasn't coordination between Twitter and the federal government as they'd like the American people to believe, and that all the so-called Twitter files really showed was a discussion on content moderation, and that we only got a fraction of the discussion. So now we're back again, no surprise. What else have they got to talk about? Not what's interested in the American people are interested, not what taxpayer dollars have brought us here to Washington to do. And the Republicans have brought in 2 of Elon Musk's public scribes to release cherry-picked, out-of-context emails and screenshots designed to promote his chosen narrative, Elon Musk's chosen narrative, that is now being parroted by the Republicans because the Republicans think that these witnesses will tell a story that's going to help them out politically. On Tuesday, the majority released an 18-page report claiming to show that the FTC is, quote, harassing Twitter. Oh my, poor Twitter. Including by seeking information about its interactions with individuals before us today. How did the report reach this conclusion? By showing 2 single paragraphs from a single demand letter, even though the report itself makes clear that there were numerous demand letters with numerous requests, none of which we've been able to see, that are more demand letters and more requests of Twitter. In other words, the conclusions are based on a fraction of information out of context, cherry-picked, surprise, just like the Twitter files. The majority conveniently forgot to share with the public that in May of 2022, well before Musk acquired Twitter, the FTC had already fined the company $150 million for failing to safeguard users' data. Users, the American people, other individuals. It's 150 million users. Twitter had not safeguarded them. Twitter entered into this consent agreement that required it to make regular reports to the FTC, and the previous consent decree between Twitter and the FTC was entered into in 2011. Elon Musk might not like this requirement, but Twitter had issues with FTC long before Musk bought the company, and there's nothing political about that. We've asked for the full set of documents that Musk must have shared with the Republicans on the committee, but we can draw some logical conclusions from what we have been given. You know what the Republican report actually shows? Two conclusions. First, the FTC has extraordinarily serious concerns about Twitter's handling of consumers' data, and that there's something going on between congressional Republicans and Elon Musk. Mr. Chairman, Americans can see through this. Musk is helping you out politically, and you're going out of your way to promote and protect him and to praise him for his work. This isn't just a matter of what data was given to these so-called journalists before us now. There are many legitimate questions about where Musk got the financing to buy Twitter. We know for a fact that foreign countries like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and possibly even Russia and China are investors presently in Twitter. Do these countries now have access to private Twitter user data? What agreements has Elon Musk reached with them? We know how Elon Musk funded the purchase because it's public. Let's look at a slide here. Here's what it shows. Musk got $500 million in financing from Binance. That's in highlight for you. A crypto exchange platform run by Chinese billionaire. That billionaire has described his funding as a small contribution to the cause. I don't know what that cause is. Musk got $1 billion from Larry Ellison, whose super PAC spent millions on Republican candidates last cycle, including election deniers. Musk got $375 million, highlighted here, from Qatar, which has recently been questioned about its lobbying practices. Musk got $700 million from Vi Capital, a secretive investment fund based in Dubai. And very interesting, as you can see down below, the nephew of the Saudi king is Twitter's second largest investor at a much larger amount. And the chair wants us to think that Elon Musk is the victim. The chairman wants us to believe that the Republicans are concerned with the federal government unfairly going after Twitter and Twitter unfairly taking down conservative posts. Just like we did several weeks ago, we're going to show that's not what the evidence shows. I want to underscore the very real threat posed by Twitter files and by the witnesses in front of us today. Here's Yoel Roth describing the harassment he and other former Twitter employees have faced because of the irresponsible way in which the witnesses in front of us and others have released this cherry-picked, out-of-context data.
Twitter, employees as far away as Manila in the Philippines. The Twitter files, I would note first and foremost, didn't just affect me, but affected much more junior employees at Twitter. Employees as far away as Manila in the Philippines were doxxed, had their families threatened, and experienced harm equal to or greater than what I've experienced. But concurrent with the Twitter files, Elon Musk also made the decision to share a defamatory allegation that I support or condone pedophilia. And this lie led directly to a wave of homophobic and anti-Semitic threats and harassment against me, of which Twitter has removed vanishingly little. And following the Daily Mail's decision to publish where I live, ultimately I had to leave my home and sell it. Those are the consequences for this type of online harassment and speech.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm not exaggerating when I say that you have called before you two witnesses who pose a direct threat to people who oppose them. It's funny when people have to go through that. Exactly. This is unacceptable. I'm ready for it. I don't know if a lot of other people are. But just as it was unacceptable for Kevin McCarthy to provide 41,000 hours of sensitive security footage to a biased talking head in an effort to rewrite what happened on January 6th. This is a new Republican playbook, apparently.
Mr.
Risk
Chairman.
American safety and security to score political points.
The gentlelady's words should be struck. We do not accuse witnesses of threatening others. That is out of line and outside the rules of this committee.
I'm not striking down that, and I can have an opinion.
You don't get to determine what's struck down.
Well, you do get an opening statement, and it's
and
about,
so let
it's
me
about
finish.
over.
The committee will suspend.
We know this is because at the first hearing, the chairman claimed that big government and big tech colluded to shape and mold the narrative and suppress information and censor Americans. This is a false narrative. We're engaging in false narratives here, and we are going to tell the truth. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I would just point out the consent decree was in our report. We offered your staff also the opportunity to review the FTC letters. You have not come over to review those letters. Third, the idea that I believe both of these individuals who are getting ready to testify, I believe they're both Democrats. The idea that two journalists who happen to be Democrats—
Did you not give that offer at 8 o'clock last
I'm
night?
talking now. Your time was ended.
Neither of us are in time.
I don't think they're here to help us politically. I think they're here to tell us the truth. And oh, by the way, the first FTC letter to Twitter after the first set of Twitter files, the very first question was, who are the journalists you're talking to? And you guys don't care. You don't care.
You
don't
care
want
about the
you don't want the American
2011
people to see.
consent decree?
You don't want the American people to see what happened, the full video, transparency. You don't want that, and you don't want two journalists who have been named personally by the Biden administration, FTC, in a letter.
The Biden administration
And you're saying
is
they're
not
here
the
to help us.
FTC.
They're here to tell their story. And frankly, I think they're brave individuals for being willing to come after they've been named in a letter from the Biden FTC.
Is this your question time now?
No, I'm responding to your ridiculous statements you made in your opening statement.
Okay, well, let's get on with it.
Oh, now we want to get on with it. So you can
did.
say all the things you want, and I
I
point out
did
the
in my
facts.
opening statement,
I
as
point
well
out
as
all
you
the
had an
facts.
opening statement. You
Chair-
said what you needed to say in your opening statement, and I, as the ranking member, have
Without
used my
objection,
time.
all other opening statements will be included in the record. We will introduce today's witness, Matt Taibbi. He's a journalist and author. He's one of the authors of the Twitter files, previously worked for Rolling Stone, that right-wing publication, Rolling Stone, where so many Republicans work at. He's also written several books about American politics and culture. And of course, as I pointed out, as the Wall Street Journal pointed out yesterday on the front page, was named by the FTC. Michael Schellenberger is also a journalist, author, and one of the authors of the Twitter files. He's also co-founded several nonprofits, including Breakthrough Institute, Environmental Progress, and the California Peace Coalition, another right-wing Republican organization, I'm sure. His work often focuses on crime and drug policy, homelessness, and the climate. We welcome our witnesses and thank them for appearing today. We will begin by swearing you in. Would you please stand and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record show both witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you, and be seated, please. We will now start with Mr. Taibbi. You guys, I think, understand the... Do you want to go with Mr. Schellenberger? We can go with Mr. Schellenberger. We'll start with Mr. Schellenberger. You understand how it works. You get 5 minutes. Make sure you hit the microphone so we can all hear. When it gets to yellow, it means just like you would expect time to start winding up, and when it gets to red, it's time to stop. But we'll be a little bit leaning on the time. Mr. Schellenberger, you are recognized for your opening statement.
Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Plaskett, members of the committee, thank you very much for inviting my testimony. In his 1961 farewell address, President Dwight Eisenhower warned of, quote, the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower feared that the size and power of the complex or cluster of government contractors and the Defense Department would, quote, endanger our liberties or democratic processes. How did he mean that? Through, quote, domination of the nation's scholars by federal employment, project allocations, and the power of money. He feared public policy would become the captive of a scientific, technological elite. Eisenhower's fears were well-founded. Today, American taxpayers are unwittingly financing the growth and power of a censorship industrial complex run by America's scientific and technological elite, which endangers our liberties and democracy. I'm grateful for this opportunity to offer this testimony and sound the alarm over the shocking and disturbing emergence of state-sponsored censorship in the United States of America. The Twitter files, state attorneys general lawsuits, and investigative reporters have revealed a large and growing network of government agencies, academic institutions, and non-governmental organizations that are actively censoring American citizens, often without their knowledge, on a range of issues. I do not know how much of the censorship is coordinated beyond what we have been able to document, and I will not speculate. I recognize that the law allows Facebook, Twitter, and other private companies to moderate content on their platforms, and I support the right of governments to communicate with the public, including to dispute inaccurate information. But government officials have been caught repeatedly pushing social media platforms to censor disfavored users and content. Often these acts of censorship threaten the legal protection social media companies need to exist, Section 230. If government officials are directing or facilitating such censorship, notes one law professor, it raises serious First Amendment questions. It is axiomatic that the government cannot do indirectly what it is prohibited from doing directly. Moreover, we know that the U.S. government has funded organizations that pressure advertisers to boycott news media organizations and social media platforms that refuse to censor and/or spread disinformation, including alleged conspiracy theories. The Stanford Internet Observatory, the University of Washington, the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab, and Graphica have all inadequately disclosed ties to the Department of Defense, the CIA, and other intelligence agencies. They work with multiple U.S. government agencies to institutionalize censorship research and advocacy within dozens of other universities and think tanks. It is important to understand how these groups function. They are not publicly engaging with their opponents in an open exchange of ideas. They aren't asking for a national debate over the limits of the First Amendment. Rather, they are creating blacklists of disfavored people and then pressuring, cajoling, and demanding that social media platforms censor, de-amplify, and even ban the people on those lists. The censorship industrial complex combines established methods of psychological manipulation, some developed by the U.S. military during the global war on terror, with highly sophisticated tools from computer science, including artificial intelligence. The complex's leaders are driven by the fear that the internet and social media platforms empower populist, alternative, and fringe personalities and views which they regard as destabilizing. Federal government officials, agencies, and contractors have gone from fighting ISIS recruiters and Russian bots to censoring and deplatforming ordinary Americans and disfavored public figures. Importantly, the bar for bringing in military-grade government monitoring and speech countering techniques has moved from, quote, countering terrorism to, quote, countering extremism to countering simple misinformation, otherwise known as being wrong on the internet. The government no longer needs a predicate of calling you a terrorist or an extremist to deploy government resources to counter your political activity. The only predicate it needs is simply the assertion that the opinion you expressed on social media is wrong. These efforts extend to influencing and even directing conventional news media organizations. Since 1971, when the Washington Post and New York Times elected to publish classified Pentagon papers about the war in Vietnam, journalists have understood that we have a professional obligation to report on leaked documents whose contents are in the public interest. And yet in 2020, the Aspen Institute and Stanford Cyber Policy Center urged journalists to, quote, break the Pentagon Papers principle and not cover leaked information to prevent the spread of disinformation. Government-funded censors frequently invoke the prevention of real-world harm to justify their demands for censorship, but the censors define harm far more expansively than the Supreme Court does. Increasingly, the censors say their goal is to restrict information that delegitimizes governmental, industrial, and news media organizations. That mandate is so sweeping that it could easily censor criticism from any part of the status quo, from elected officials to institutions to laws. Congress should immediately cut off funding to the censors and investigate their activities. It should mandate instant reporting of all conversations between social media executives, government employees, and government contractors concerning content moderation. And finally, Congress should limit the broad permission given to social media platforms to censor, deplatform, and spread propaganda.